Human beings are master imitators. We have the ability to learn from literally observation. Unlike our animal friends, which may take possibly millions and millions of years to evolve before they can sufficiently adapt to their environment, we can kind of look at somebody hitting their head against the wall until they finally figure it out and then take their skill as our own and say, yeah, that's how it's done. For an example, imagine that a polar bear's environment goes down in about 30 degrees temperature. Now, this ends up killing off most of the polar bears because they're not used to such a dramatic change, but there's a couple that still survive, and those are ones with thicker coats of fur. These ones Darwin would probably award himself with the Survival of the Fittest award. Now, it would take a second before those bears find the other bears with the same traits, or bears that happen to survive from taking shelter, and be able to repopulate. And essentially, the only reason that they survived is because they had a genetic advantage, in a way. Human beings don't necessarily need this kind of advantage because our brains themselves can constantly, from their plasticity, learn just by looking at something else. Like, a father could, in the same situation, kill a polar bear, put the pelt over himself, and then wear it, and then just by observation his son could see it and do the same thing within the same lifetime, which is a lot more efficient than taking millions and millions of years to possibly reproduce your whole culture. Why is that, though? Well, let's go ahead and shed some light on this. On why human beings have such an advantage over our little furry friends in the animal kingdom. So what exactly is it that gives us the advantage over other animals to be able to look and observe and learn instead of having to go through the hard knocks ourselves during each problem? Well, for one, our brains developed a little bit differently. Now, chimpanzees have this ability too, and what they are called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are neurons specifically inside of the brain that activate whether or not you're doing something, or if you observe somebody doing something that's kind of familiar to you. For an example, if something like drinking a glass of water, which you're very familiar with, if you were to drink that glass of water, that part of your brain would light up if you were looking at an MRI. If you were to watch somebody else do the same action, it would also flare up because it's almost as if that part of your brain's activated regardless. It's one of our gateways to empathy, one of our gateways to being able to be so finely tuned to mimic on what other people are doing so we can have synchronized things. Imagine cheerleading, for example. Imagine people doing synchronized any kind of activity. It's very important that you can look at other people in a society and kind of just mimic what they're doing. There is unfortunately a dark side to mirror neurons because we will learn from either positive or negative things. For an example, get off of that camera. If somebody's having a bad day and they come home, and even though you're having a great time, you're going to pick up on the fact that they're having a bad day because we know how it is to be unhappy, we know how it is to be sad, and we know what it is to have a frown on our face. So the unfortunate part is that the mirror neurons in your brain, since they don't distinguish the difference between you doing something and somebody else doing something, is going to affect what scientists call your visuoaffective mapping. One of the most powerful effects that ended up having a negative impact on people was something called the Vader effect. And this was based off a book from a German author. The book was called The Sorrows of Young Vader. And what it was is it depicted a young man in his romance losing a woman of his life, like that was the world to him, and he ended up killing himself as a result. Many people followed suit and ended up dressing similar, like the character had an open book, wrote letters about how they couldn't take it anymore, and ended up killing themselves. Similarly, Kurt Cobain, once he died, several people also killed themselves as a result because they empathized with him so strongly. They were so socially connected that they had to end their lives too. This happened in several different events, but this is kind of a bad thing, right? The purpose of this video isn't necessarily to provide you with some kind of solution per se. It's more like to identify where maybe some of our problems are coming from. See, unlike our little furry friends right here, we have the capability as human beings to identify what the problem is, and therefore we can correct it from there. I'm a firm believer that if you can use a process of logical thinking for the most part, and you can identify so far why exactly we're feeling the way we're feeling, if you can look at it from a point of objectiveness and disconnect yourself from it, well, you can find a solution. So this is just one more way to think Why am I having a bad day? Oh yeah, it's just those pesky mirror neurons and everyone else is acting like a poop. So therefore, by association, I'm going to act like one too. So that's all I've got for you today. Wonderful talking as always. I'll see you guys later.